Hello and welcome to another episode of Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd. I'll be your host for another hour of answering your gardening questions. You can submit those questions by dialing 402-472-1212 if you live in Lincoln. Toll-free number is 800-676-5446. Emailed questions and those attached JPEG pictures can be sent to byf@unl.edu. We answer those on future shows if we possibly can. We have to know where you're from. At least give us the corner of the state. That really helps us give you the good information. You know, Backyard Farmer is also available during the week on all that good social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest. So to start tonight, let's take a look at a creature in your hand, Wayne.
Don't worry, it's dead. It's not getting away.
Oh, I like those cicadas. So
yeah, I have a cicada in my hand. This is one of the ones that we're hearing up in the trees right now. The reason why I brought this one in is because it happens to be a male. So if you get zoomed in here on the other side, you can see the sound-producing plates on the underside of the abdomen. Only the males have those. So if you want to tell a boy from a girl cicada, you look for the sound-producing plates. And one of the old adages is you hear the cicada 6 more weeks until the first frost or freeze or however you have it. Well, across the last 3 years, we've been keeping track of when they start singing across the state of Nebraska, all the way from Scottsbluff to Norfolk, to Omaha, to Lincoln, to Hastings. So we've got the state covered. And what we're finding is right now we're looking at about 91 days. So about 13 weeks until the first frost. Now that's as NOAA defines it. That's 36 degrees to 33 degrees. And then the first freeze, you get about 14 and a half weeks. And that's that 32 down to 29. And then a hard freeze of 28 or less is about 16 weeks. On average, the last 3 years. So unfortunately, that 6 weeks isn't quite accurate.
Well, but that's pretty cool that it would be pretty consistent across the state. Yeah, it's a great sound. Love the sound. All right, Cole, turf plugs.
Yeah, I'm disappointed in me for bringing turf again.
You're in the turf chair.
Yeah, they're giving me trouble for the show. I said, hello, I'm in the turf chair. Deal with it. I'm playing around above my pay grade again tonight. I've got some ryegrass plugs, perennial ryegrass plugs with disease growing on them. And so you can see a couple different options for what this could probably be, but since we've had some warm weather recently, I feel like this spot here is probably gray leaf spot. Got some chocolate brown lesions with some yellow halos. This is a really detrimental disease. It can wipe out some good standard ryegrass in a couple days. And so this is one that you would want to keep an eye on if you have perennial ryegrass. There's not a lot of perennial ryegrass lawns around, and I get a lot of questions about perennial ryegrass lawns because people like the dark green color and they want to know why they shouldn't have them. And aside from being intolerant of a lot of abiotic stresses, they're susceptible to pretty much every disease known to man. So that's a great reason not to grow perennial ryegrass. And then the other sample I have here is another disease, and this one's more common, and this would be dollar spot. And you can see these straw-colored lesions on this leaf blade that tend to girdle the whole leaf blade and sometimes have an hourglass type appearance as that leaf starts to senesce. And so that's a more common disease, and it's really going to be active here as we get cooler temperatures. So one to keep a lookout for, but it's not really something that you really have to worry about. Just kind of let it run its course.
All right, it's a good year for turfgrass diseases.
Yes, sorry for bringing turf again.
Well, we hope you don't start bringing trees or we're in trouble.
Yeah, I won't have anything to say.
Speaking of which, Lauren, who hates trees.
Yeah, and actually I like it when Cole brings diseases because it's like we got double pathology night here, so it's great. So I brought along just a pile of leaves and then some fruits, and I want to show you the inoculum for scab. So if anybody has flowering crabapple trees and you've got leaves that are falling and all the yellow, all the spots, the curled up leaves, here's a couple fruits just to go on, just like potato scab, or when we see scab on larger fruiting apples, same type of thing that we see with the flowering crab. And all of this will be inoculum, well, one for the disease to continue this year, but to be there next year. So on any of our flowering crabapple trees that are heavily defoliating, there's a really good chance that in 90+% of the time, I'm going to say that's scab at this point of year. So as you're looking at establishing new trees, if anyone is going to be planting this fall, which is a great time to plant trees, make sure you're using resistance so that you don't have to deal with scab in the future. So this is one that will be there every year.
Perfect, and it varies across the state.
It really does, but you see it pretty much. If you got some humidity, you can have scab.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. You have some great fruits.
Well, I have a couple different things here. The last time I was on, I brought in 2 different trees as we think about planting trees for this fall. And, you know, a couple different things to think about. These are not our normal sorts of trees that you would have in your landscape or your lawn. The first one is ginkgo. So what's nice about ginkgo is it's a pretty adaptable tree. And it's, you know, a lot of cities like to use it for street trees and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a fun tree to have. It has this fun kind of classic leaf shape. The downside is they're male and female trees, and most of the trees in the trade are going to be a male seedless version. But occasionally, you may have the opportunity to get a tree grown from seed, and you may end up with a female tree. And you can see on this small branch that I cut off the fruit load. So for someone like me who likes things like this, that's not a problem. But they have a tendency to get a little stinky as they ripen, and you have a lot of stinky fruit on the ground, so that could be a problem for some. Just kind of warning you. But it is a fun tree. The other thing, Wayne was talking about our first frost and cold weather. You know, these turn a brilliant yellow, which is wonderful, and then they have a tendency to drop all their leaves on the same day. Mm-hmm. So if you don't like to clean up leaves all through the winter from an oak or something like that, the nice thing about this, when the leaves drop, you're done. Mm-hmm. So the other one I'm going to talk about quickly is northern pecan. I really like this tree. It really has kind of elegant branching. I like the leaves, the texture of it. And again, it has edible fruit if you get to it before the squirrels, which for some reason this year they didn't bother this particular tree, but normally they're long gone by now. The nuts aren't nearly as large as some of those pecans you may see in the south, but it's a fun tree. It's very hardy. Something you might want to consider for your own landscape.
And beautiful. I mean,
Yeah.
they really are beautiful.
Yeah.
Very elegant tree. So thanks. All right, first picture is yours, Wayne. This is Clarkson up north, and we have a peach of a problem. So I think we have about 3 pictures of the problem with the peach. Starting with this, they did spray. They still have peaches that they're assuming these are insects. Shows the clear gel, and then when they cut, it seems like the pit separates and starts to rot. And the third was this monstrous amount of gel after a rain, which is, you know, highly unappetizing. What is that?
Well, most likely at this stage in the development, I'm going to have to go with Oriental fruit moth. It has a tendency during the first generation to get into twigs and bore in twigs. But once those twigs harden up for the year, then they get into the fruits. And so then they bore in, which is this picture right here. It's just getting started, small borehole, and then they bore into the center and they get into the pit and go for the seed sometimes. So that's likely what's going on here. If they were not spraying the fruits, which a lot of people don't like to when they're that advanced, they just missed it. Oriental fruit moth is best controlled early in the season, then you're catching the adult moths before they start laying eggs.
So that'd be a good one for us to talk about on the winter show.
Would be.
All right, excellent, thanks. Okay, Cole, you have A, B, C, D.
Ooh.
And the ABC
Is it
are
multiple choice?
not so much, but he's seeing these stripes in his lawn, and he's lived there 12 years. He hasn't seen it before. It was seeded with fescue. The 2 neighbors have the same things, and he's also saying, looks like the case it occurs adjacent to the drain field of the septic system. So, but he's not seen it before. So what do you think here?
Okay, so I don't have an explanation for why we maybe haven't seen it before, but this can actually be an indication that a septic drain field is working properly, because shallow can be soil above drain tiles. And so there's, you know, all of the roots then for those plants above those drain tiles are in the top 10 inches or foot of soil. And so when water use is high during summer, they soak up all the water above the drain tiles, and you just get drought stress, especially when it's hot. So that would be my guess.
On those 3?
Yeah.
Okay, probably. And your 4th picture is a circle.
Yeah.
Instead of a straight line.
And so this one, straight lines we think abiotic, circles and patches we think biotic. Mm-hmm. But this is an interesting biotic problem because it's caused by fungi in the soil, soil-borne fungi, but they're not actually infecting turfgrass roots. They decompose organic matter and cause this waxy buildup on soil particles and cause them to repel water. And so this is actually the disease we call fairy ring. And so you can alleviate it by cob forking or pitchforking and using a wetting agent and just getting some water in the soil.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Cole. All right, Lauren, you have a couple, one of them being first time this particular viewer has, and she's from southwest of Grand Island. She's planted green beans, and they have this sort of what she's describing as a rusty look. And then you have another one that is an ornamental plant here in Lincoln, which is actually purple dome aster. So do we have rust or something different?
Different things. So on this one, while it's up, well, first on the beans then. So that discoloration, it looks rusty, but I really don't think it's rust. So I think that's some discoloration from something else, and I can't tell. If they have rust on the beans, there should be some pustules, and actually you would see enough sporulation on there that you would get a discolored dust that would be the spores on the leaves. So I'd encourage them to look at the leaves and see if they have rust. This looks more like a discoloration from something else, and I'm sorry, I can't tell you what. You may want to take a sample into the local extension office or send to the clinic. This one looks like just a fungal leaf spot. I'm going to guess Septoria on this plant. Probably going to be favored by any type of overhead irrigation, so if you can avoid that, you're going to be better off. I wouldn't really try to control it though. I mean, most of these things you can kind of watch, do some cultural management, avoid irrigation, and kind of go from there.
And on Purple Dome, you can tear it out and start over with one that doesn't get that,
There
because
you
they
go.
all
So,
get that.
Yeah, I always hate to recommend a fungicide on an ornamental flower like that
Right.
if it's not really a prize cutting or something.
Perfect. All right, thank you, Lauren. All right, so this is a fun one for you, Jeff, because
Okay.
you know this plant. This is a Burt County viewer. What is this very thorny, 7 feet tall, singular plant growing in a thicket?
So that's our devil's walking stick, Aurelia. And, you know, it's a native plant to Missouri. So I guess someone may have brought the seed up, or an animal may have. It's kind of a fun plant. It can be very thorny. And my experience with them is they have a tendency to die to the ground in our area and kind of re-sucker back. And you end up, you know, the first year it's 1, then you got 2, and then you got 9. You know, so it's kind of one of those when I dealt with it. We had it at Horning State Farm near Plattsmouth. We had a kind of a little thicket of it that, you know, so when we had to pick, the low man had to go cut them back every year. So anyway, because they were so thorny. But it's an interesting plant.
Very interesting. Interesting seed on that.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys. Well, you know, this past week, East Campus was abuzz with new students attending class as the new school year began again. A new residence hall was completed this summer along with its new landscape. Jeff is going to highlight some of the new plantings and talk about taking care of some of those bigger trees that got planted.
When you come to East Campus, in particular, if you come to the Backyard Farmer Garden, you'll notice directly south of the garden, you can't hardly miss it, is our new Martin Massingale dorm here on East Campus. And this summer, a whole new landscape was installed around this building. It's a variety of things. We have oaks, sycamores, serviceberries, magnolias, a variety of shrubs and perennials for the new students to enjoy and create some atmosphere around their new housing units. So it's really it's a beautiful site. If you're on East Campus, take some time to visit this area. One of the things we're going to talk about today is how to care for newly transplanted trees. And in particular, something that may be larger than our typical tree we'd recommend on Backyard Farmer. You can see this concolor fir I'm standing next to. I'm 6 foot tall, so it's 11 feet tall, something like this. So this is bigger than what we'll typically talk about on the show. When we're talking about something maybe an inch caliper tree, 4 or 5 feet tall, something like that. And we recommend those because those are easier to manage, easier to get established in that first year or two. With a bigger tree, something to keep in mind, we typically recommend that it takes a year per inch diameter to get a tree established, to regrow the root system and get it settled into its new home. So if it's a 3 or 4 inch caliper tree, we're looking at 3 or 4 years of us giving it a little bit more care than we typically would to help get it established. Some of the things we want to think about in that first year, that first growing season, is making sure it's getting about an inch of water a week. So between the rain and your irrigation, and it's something you're going to want to be checking and making sure you're not overwatering it. That can be as detrimental to the tree as underwatering it. So it's something to kind of manage, make sure the soil is moist but not saturated. We want to make sure that we're mulching the tree. So again, 2 to 3 inches of mulch. We want to make sure that we keep it away from the base, away from the stem of the tree, a few inches away, so we don't have insects and rodents and that sort of thing living in and maybe damaging our trees. So pull that mulch away, but 2 or 3 inches out beyond the drip line, and especially if you're in an area where you're mowing or something like that, so you're not going to possibly injure the tree when you're doing some of this other work in your yard. So those are the 2 things. These particular trees aren't staked, but a bigger tree may need staking. And so there's some good materials out there that you can get at your garden center to stake a tree properly. And again, we don't want it too tight. We want to have a little bit of movement in that first year to help develop the root system and keep that caliper of the tree to increase over time. So it takes some movement to increase that caliper of the tree. But that may be something with a bigger tree that we're going to want to look at staking that. And then as we get down the road, we want to avoid fertilizing that first year. But I would recommend after a year or so, if you want to pull the mulch back and add a couple inches of compost around the root zone area, and then put a couple inches of mulch back on top of it, that will help increase the fertility of that soil after the tree's been established for a time. So the next time you come to East Campus, remember to stop by the new Massengale housing unit, visit the new landscape around here and see it grow. We've added trees to the Arboretum and throughout campus, so there's a lot of things for you to visit when you come see the Backyard Farmer Garden.
There really is a lot to see over in that area of East Campus, including, of course, the Backyard Farmer Garden, our courtyard in Keim Hall, Maxwell Arboretum, and the beautiful new landscape around the Massengale Residence Hall. We're looking forward to seeing that come to fruition, and students are going to be working on some design work on the other end of that, so that'll be fun. All right, you have an A and a B, Wayne, and this is actually a rosy little creature on a red hanging geranium, and this is from Columbus. Wants to know what it is going to be, what its future self is going to be.
Well, this one, I think I talked about it 2 weeks ago when we were on. We just had frass at that point. This one is the full-blown critter. This is tobacco budworm, and it's taken on the color of the flowers it's been feeding on. And BT or like a neem oil would probably just fine with this.
Or flick.
Well, if they've got it posed nice like this, they could easily squish it.
They could squish, okay. And then we have found in a garden on the southeast Nebraska on a farm. That's a big man with a big glove and a big thing. What is that?
This is one of our hornless hornworms. This is the Akamon sphinx. It gets on some of our vining plants, including grape and Virginia creeper. So yes, there is something that eats Virginia creeper. Really nice looking moth when it's full grown and flying around as an adult. And they're usually not a high enough population to warrant any kind of treatment.
Cool, and then we have a C, which is an emerging creature.
Actually, that's not even emerging at this point. That's just the old head from the caterpillar sitting in there.
Ick.
So what we have here, this is most likely a dagger moth that has, the caterpillar has crawled up on the side of that building and is chewed into the wood and incorporated some of the wood chewings into its cocoon. And so right now you've got the pupa sitting there and the old remnants of the caterpillar that was.
Well, there we go. Nature's wondrous something or other.
Sit back and enjoy the show.
Exactly. All right, so you have a thistle picture. This is a Southeast Lincoln viewer and has this particular thistle growing in the shade under her pines. Smaller than a musk, darker purple flower. She wants to know what it is, and is it one that is on that list of noxious, or is it a better guy?
Okay, it's not a better guy or gal. This is based on size and flower and leaf shape. This looks to me like bull thistle. And I don't know, is it on some noxious lists? It's just very invasive.
Right, very prolific.
Yeah, so spreads by seed, and so it can spread rather quickly. It's a biennial plant. So vegetative in the first year, flowers in the second year, and then generally doesn't make it much beyond that. So if you want to control it apart from hand pulling or digging, broadleaf herbicides mixed with triclopyr and then maybe a phenoxy herbicide like 2,4-D will work well, but they'll work best in the first year of growth when it's purely vegetative versus when it's bolted and has produced a flower.
Okay, or put on your fireplace gloves and start digging, right?
Right, right.
Okay, all right. Lauren, you have a picture of a magnolia, and interesting that this is on the trunk and some of the leaves are now turning black as if they're molded. And I know we've seen a lot of powdery mildew on foliage on magnolias this year, which is a little unusual, but what's going on here?
Well, in powdery mildew, I think this is something a little different though, because this looks like a fairly large fungal growth on the spots, and it really makes me wonder if there's not some infection going on in the trunk. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it looks like something that you've got some growth on the tree that may be coming out. So if you're seeing branches die in it, good indication that it is probably on its way out. If you're not, it could be a surface mold, and you could kind of scratch that and just see if there's anything growing through the tree that you could tell. And that may just be a surface mold where it's all on that one side too, if that's, you know, like a north side type situation.
Really interesting, and that might be one where it'd be fun to see a sample.
Yeah, it would be. If it's all on the north side though, it may just be a surface mold. So there's two types of things it could be. I wouldn't do anything with it though.
Cool,
But check it.
thanks. Jeff, this is a viewer who has blueberries that are looking pretty chlorotic. They're top hat. They're in containers and losing leaves. He did water with iron. This is in Chadron in containers. And he also kept them in the pots all winter. The leaves fell off. He put them in a root cellar, kept it about 40 degrees. What do we think here is going on with this particular?
You know, my thought is because I actually this year grew blueberries in pots myself, and quite honestly, I mean, I'm still eating blueberries. They're just flowering and producing nonstop. So, but it sounded like that he did try to put in some sort of acidic mix, and that's what I did as well. So to kind of create its own little situation for it there, and it's done pretty well. I think probably what happened is over the winter you had root damage. And I think it probably, those roots just aren't recovering and likely won't, looking at that, as chlorotic as they are, and I know you've tried to treat them. So they should have responded in some positive way. They didn't, and I think we're better off starting over.
Okay, I'll be interested to see how yours do over the winter if you're going to stick them in the landscape.
Yeah, I plan on sticking them in the garden. That's what I do with a lot of my potted stuff, and just kind of heal them in for the winter and then pull them back out.
Cool, fun. Well, you know, our garden is bursting with colors from all of the fantastic flowers, and our vegetables are also really doing well this summer. Here to focus on one of the All-America Selection peppers is Terry James from the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we're going to continue those 2017 All-America Selection winners. We've had a lot this year to look at, and one more that we're going to look at this week is a pepper. It's called Mad Hatter. It doesn't really get very tall, about 36 inches at the max. However, ours aren't quite that tall. They're a little bit too shaded for where we planted them. But the cool part of this one is its shape. It's got this little kind of hat-shaped plant, turns green, yellow, orange, red, great colors. Looks like maybe an habanero pepper, so it's kind of cool to look at in some pots, but this is a sweet pepper. So anybody can eat it, you can preserve it. It's a great ornamental and it's a great edible pepper. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and check out the Mad Hatter pepper.
Cute shape to those peppers and a really fun name, and they are sweet, so yes, no fire to them. Might be a really fun one to grow in the garden next time, and then while you're at it, read Alice in Wonderland. I know that people ask us about eating the things in our garden, and the peppers are always one where you say, well, you might want to take a tiny little bite first. All right, this is a Lincoln viewer, Wayne, who has spider mites in her yews. What should she do about getting rid of them in her yews?
If the infestation isn't very heavy yet, you could probably use a strong blast from a hose to get in there and knock them off and get them washed off. That's one way to go about it. You'll probably have to go back and redo it in about 7 to 10 days once the eggs have hatched that were there when you did it the first time, because those can be attached. If you're looking at a fairly heavy infestation and you want to try and rescue that plant, then you're looking at a bifenthrin or malathion type product in order to take care of those mites. retreatment may be necessary again in 7 to 10 days to take care of any eggs that would have hatched in that time period.
Okay, all right. Well, you're going to get this one, Cole, because it's a weed. A farm 30 miles north of Norfolk near Clarkson has pennycress along the driveway and apparently knotweed. Doesn't want to kill the knotweed, but is frustrated by the pennycress. Wonders, can she put a pre-emerge down for the pennycress only? Would preen work? And doesn't want to spray and kill the knotweed. Pass.
I don't mean to look shocked, but I feel shocked.
Yeah.
So wants to use preen to prevent pennycress.
Just the pennycress.
And I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, that would be an interesting.
Yeah.
Don't know. That might require some further research, or Jeff,
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you're using a pre-emerge, it's going to control the knotweed as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
No selective.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, interesting one. We'll see if she comes back to us with a follow-up question. All right, Lauren. This is a viewer who has a big cottonwood, a female. She's cottoning, but has a pretty bad connection in the trunk and permanent wet wood, kind of a thing running down from that. What would have caused it? Is there anything she can do about it? Should she go ahead and just take that tree out and start over?
Well, there's a couple things. Wetwood is usually in the crotch of the tree there. You'll have just a mass of material that you'll actually get a bacterium that's in there growing. And sometimes these trees can even hiss and exude foaming effluent just from that mass that's sitting there reproducing. Not a lot I'd recommend. If you talk to people, they may say put a drain or something in it, but I wouldn't recommend that. That does damage to the tree, and we wouldn't recommend it. The biggest thing is to watch that it's not a hazard tree where it's at. So if it's close to something that, that could result in that splitting and something falling on a house, then I would consider removal or, get it checked carefully for any hazard potential. But as far as treatment, I really don't have anything to recommend on that.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to kind of watch it.
Okay. Thanks, Lauren. This is a fun one. This is from Seward. Jeff has one of the new selections of big blue stem called Red October.
Okay.
And doing great, but he doesn't know how to manage them. When he wants to let them overwinter with a seed head stand and then cut them back.
Right.
Is that correct? And then when and how does he do that?
You could do it anytime, really. I mean, anytime before they really start getting into gear in the spring. So I would say, by the first part of April, I would go ahead and have them cut back. And then you should be fine. And, I would take them pretty far back, a couple inches off the ground. And you can use a variety of things. We'll even use hedge trimmers right now for some of our bigger grass groupings. So that works pretty well for us. And, otherwise enjoy it. It should be a pretty carefree plant. And you may get some little seedlings coming up. When you leave stuff standing that long, you may get some volunteers, which is all right. I kind of like that stuff. So
Now, whether they're Red October or
Right,
not remains to be seen.
right.
But yeah, beautiful plant. It'd be a fun one to have.
Right.
Are you ready?
yes.
So we have a North Platte acreage owner who wants to know deer and rabbit-proof bulbs to plant with their daffodils. Any suggestions?
I don't know if anything's 100% deer or rabbit proof.
Right, but are there some bulbs?
Well, sure. I think there's a lot of bulbs that they can plant. So, yeah.
That sounds like a pass
Yeah,
to me.
it's a pass, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so what causes that hard white layer in tomatoes, sometimes on the interior? Do you know what that might be?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't had any problems with that either. So these are great questions, Kim. Good job.
These are from viewers.
Yeah.
We have a ghost pepper that's dropped all its flowers, and it's planted in what's called an earth box. Why do the peppers drop their flowers?
Well, I would say it's either gotten too wet or too dry or the temperature's not right. So I think that's, the same with tomatoes and anything else. If it's dropping their flowers, my guess it probably dried out.
Okay. A Mitchell viewer has a mulberry that is still weeping from pruning wounds that were made a few years ago. What's up with that?
Well, that's interesting. It sounds like the wounds are not healing, so it's not forming any callus tissue on those cuts. So, I don't
She
know.
got one guess.
It's a new low.
Thank gosh.
Our viewers are stumping us on the lightning round.
I'll just pass everyone. Cole, you can win it. You can just answer one correct,
My
and
confidence
Wayne
is a little
passes,
high
you're
right
there.
He's got to answer 3 because Jeff did get 2.
Yeah,
All right, Lauren, are you ready for 3?
sure.
So this is a Battle Creek viewer who wants to know when this fall they should spray for botrytis and peonies.
Cool.
They're
Don't
saying
spray.
fall.
Don't spray this fall. Wait till next spring. Do some sanitation in the spring after things are starting to come up, and then worry about spraying next year.
Okay. The David City viewer has some white stuff on the leaves of their coneflower plants, and then it kind of punches
Powdery
holes.
mildew, most likely, and I wouldn't do anything with that. Just washing with a water hose will help.
Okay, we have an Elkhorn viewer that has an
Always.
aspen they planted last year, has black leaf spots starting from the top. What do they do about that?
Probably Marsanina leaf spot or Septoria leaf spot. There are some different fungicides you could apply if you want to go the chemical route. Most of the time it doesn't kill it though, so I really have a hard time with that.
Okay. Is there a late blight of tomatoes, and has that hit us yet?
Late blight, let's see. You can see it, but I haven't seen it. Usually we talk about late blight in potatoes. We have an early blight in tomatoes that's much more common.
All right. This is the 4th round of rust on serviceberry with this Nebraska City viewer. What in the world is up with that?
Pass.
Mother Nature.
I've already won.
You got 2 more to go, all right?
What a mean thing to say.
You ready, Cole?
No, I need a minute. Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. We have a Tecumseh viewer who wants to know what is the best time to aerate and or dethatch this fall.
Coming up in September, probably, so just a few more weeks.
All right. What is the best treatment for a lawn that is completely full of crabgrass, and when?
Okay, so crabgrass, it's best to stop with pre-emergent herbicides in the spring. Right now, you could use Drive, and it will take probably a couple applications.
All right. This is a viewer from southeast South Dakota. How do you kill the weed trees in a pasture without killing the pasture grasses?
There's a number of options. Probably try triclopyr to fresh cut stems.
All right. This is also a Tecumseh viewer. When do you apply a winterizer fertilizer?
A winterizer fertilizer, okay. So I'm not huge on winterizer fertilizers. I think there's been a lot of research that has shown they don't improve cold tolerance unless it's a warm season grass. But if you're going to do it, it would be probably late October to November.
All right. A Hornick, Iowa viewer wants to know if an 8-year-old bag of grass seed in non-climate controlled conditions will germinate.
No, probably
Nice
not.
job. That was a tie, maybe.
No, I beat him.
All right, Wayne.
Do I get a
You're
gold?
in the
for
hot
gold?
seat.
Really complicated question for the last one.
Okay. This is actually a viewer who did what we said and disposed of bagworms in soapy water, but now she wants to know how you dispose of them now that they're dead.
If they're dead, you can compost them, you throw them in the trash.
Okay.
Your choice.
All right. Is there a safe way to get rid of the aphids on milkweeds without harming the caterpillars? From 2 viewers.
If the caterpillars are on there, no, unless you do hand removal, because the water jet can harm the caterpillars as well.
All right. When do you cut back milkweeds so a generation of monarchs doesn't start a 2nd generation and then croak over the winter?
We're already past the 2nd generation
Okay.
at this point. And then once they start migrating, they're not laying eggs here.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be too
No
concerned
worry.
with it.
All right. Is it okay to use 8 on bagworms and do that now?
Only during the crawler stage before they have bags. So that's next year in July.
All right. We have an Omaha viewer who says, are the Japanese beetle almost finished? It seems like they started all over again.
Who knows? We'll wait and see. They'll keep going until they're killed off.
All right. We have Ajax on carpenter ants. Does that work?
Absolutely not. That's a misuse of the product. You're asking for the EPA to come haunt you.
Winna, winna. Although the lightning did go, the thunder just didn't boom. So, but
I think Cole won.
you were called a winner in the voice in my ear.
He showed a turf sample with disease. He won.
All right. So let us go to the plant of the
Says
week.
the man who wants to replace me.
Yeah, and we're going to give credit to one of our great master gardeners who answers the phone for bringing this in, Carol Rustad.
Yeah, we have 2 really cool plants here tonight. So we'll start off with the orange one here. So this is Chinese lantern. So it's It's a perennial. And is it kind of a ground cherry as well, sort of thing? So it'll have a fruit inside here. And so it can be a little aggressive with all this fruit. So that might be one thing to think about if you have this, is you might want to cut it back and pull that away. But it's obviously beautiful dried. So it's a very cool plant, a lot of fun. And then this variegated plant we have here is a euphorbia, so snow in the mountain. So again, if you have pastures, you may be familiar with this plant. You may see it related to leafy spurge. So it can be aggressive in the right situation. And as a euphorbia, if you're sensitive, you know, this one has a sap that can cause problems for certain folks. So that may be something to think about if you have it, to be careful. You might want to wear gloves when working with your spurges. So, but
Excellent.
pretty cool plants.
Pretty cool together, yeah. Using a weed as an ornamental and using an ornamental as an ornamental. And a cut flower. And I think that might be one of the cultivars with giant seeds, or giant pods, just looking at it. Yeah. All right, thanks, Jeff. Okay, we have a picture for you that is an insect and sod. This is kind of the Cozad Lex area. And she's gotten sod about 4 times, and she keeps finding these small black insects in them. And should she be concerned?
Well, Cole might be drooling now. This is a bill bug. The patterning on the elytra makes me think and the location, that it could be a Denver bill bug if that's about 3/8 to a 1/2 inch long at that point. They can be a problem of turf if they get to be too high of a population. So they can either sink some red solo cups in the yard and trap them, see how many they get across the day. If they're up in that 8 to 10 region, they might need to think about it. Or if they start breaking open some of the grass stems looking in there at the top of the root, and they might find larvae. If they find enough larvae per square foot, it might also be an issue.
All right, interesting. Thanks. We had this picture a couple weeks ago, and we actually asked for follow-up pictures, and he sent us follow-up pictures a little closer. This is weeping water, and he's concerned about those mounds or humps of turf in his turf. What are they, and how does he get rid of them selectively without getting rid of everything else?
Okay, so it's still kind of hard to tell exactly what's going on here, but based on the fact that we think it's a perennial grass that's coming back in the same spots, and the mowing quality looks really poor. So I see some white kind of frayed leaf tips, and so both of those together indicate to me that this might be fountain grass, which is a Pennisetum species, and it's an ornamental in landscape beds, and since I see that it's adjacent to a bed, if Pennisetum is in that landscape bed, then that makes me even more confident that this is probably fountain grass. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to kill. You can use quinclorac containing herbicides like Drive, which we use to kill crabgrass, or a number of other mixed products have quinclorac in them. A couple applications will do the job when fountain grass is actively growing, so probably getting closer to fall and make a couple applications, or glyphosate's an option.
All right, and pretty selective on those humps, right? So you don't wipe out everything else.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, so Drive would be pretty selective, but
Okay.
glyphosate, yeah, definitely be more careful.
Okay, thanks. You have an ABC here, Lauren, and it's shroom night. What is it, and is it poisonous? That's the first one. We don't know where this one is from.
This first one, I cannot tell you for sure on this one. It looks, it's got the polypore where it doesn't have gills underneath, but I'm not certain on this one.
But
I
don't
would,
eat it.
don't eat it. Yeah, don't eat it. On this
Okay,
one.
all right. The second one is Lyons, Nebraska, Northeast. Beautiful.
And I think this looked like it was growing on the side of a tree maybe or
She
something.
said a stump, yeah, old oak stump.
A common this is a polypore species, very common wood decaying fungus. Some people refer to some of these as like an elephant ear fungus when they're tender and young, but I would not recommend eating it.
And the third one, we had the top side. She's northwest of Gibbon, and we had asked her, we'd like to see the underside for the gills, which helps, and she did, I believe, send us the underside with the gills.
Yeah, and this is, I believe, a Lepiota species, which this time of year you see these really large ones, and you can see the can there. I've seen these, over 12 inches across. And even as you drive through the rangelands, you can see large circular patches, usually in grasslands. It's one that all of these I wouldn't recommend eating them, you know, unless you're with someone that's an expert, because you can really misidentify these really easily. And some people react to different species differently. So just like, I mean, you can have an allergy to an agaricus in the grocery store. So I would just be very cautious with that and wouldn't really recommend eating wild collected fungi unless you're an expert.
All right, thank you, Lauren. You have an ID, a couple of them here, Jeff. One is southwestern Nebraska. She knows it is a biennial
Okay.
and wonders what this is.
Ipomopsis rubra, so standing cypress. So it's it's a pretty large family, kind of southern half of the U.S. Really cool plant.
Great for hummers.
Yeah, right.
And the second found this under the flagpole and thought a bird perhaps brought it on the acreage. They're near Seward. They wonder if it's noxious or something and should they get rid of it.
Yeah, it is. Although it's kind of a cool plant, it's Jimson weed. So I suppose if you're growing soybeans, you don't think it's a cool plant, but it's kind of an unusual plant. You know, it's poisonous. All parts are poisonous. So that's maybe the other thing, and it produces a ton of seed. So. If you want to keep it because it's flowering and it's nice, that's great, but then I'd make sure you pull any seed pods off of it. And it's a super thorny seed pod too, so that's the other issue with it. So, I don't know, I'd say get rid of it. But.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, guys. Well, you know, we have an exciting research project underway to discover if hazelnuts can be grown in Nebraska. The Nebraska Forest Service has joined up with other researchers to develop hazelnuts as a sustainable crop here in the state that could also be part of an edible landscape. Here to tell us more is Aaron Clare from the Nebraska Forest Service.
So we're here at Horning State Farm Demonstration Forest. This was donated to the university back in the 50s and was a tree testing facility for a number of years. Now the Nebraska Forest Service has we've been turning it into a forestry demonstration center. It's also the home of our hybrid hazelnut testing plots, where we screen hybrid hazelnuts for disease resistance, nut characteristics, and yield. So in 2009, the Nebraska Forest Service, along with Rutgers, Oregon State University, and the National Arbor Day Foundation, got together and started the Hybrid Hazelnut Consortium. The goal of the consortium is to develop disease-resistant, high-quality hazelnut cultivars for production in the Midwest and Great Plains and eastern half of the United States, basically. So hazelnuts are a low-input, high-value crop for which the global demand is much higher than current production availability. They have good flavor. They're used in a lot of different foods. Think Nutella and Ferrero Rocher. It also makes a good cooking oil. The oil characteristics of hazelnut oil is very similar to olive oil. So we really think that hazelnuts could be a third crop for the Midwest and Great Plains. We've just got to get some good plants available for people to use. So currently we grow these plants in rows that are spaced 15 feet apart. We start the plants at a 3-foot spacing for our screening, but if you're going to grow these in an orchard, you would want to be spacing them 10 to 12 feet. We have to use drip irrigation for the first 2 years to get the plants established. They need about 1 inch of water per week. After that, they don't need any water. So they're pretty drought resistant. Weed control is an issue. During establishment, you want to keep your rows clean of weeds. Hazelnuts do require some certain soil characteristics. They don't want to be in real heavy wet soils, but they do tolerate some pretty varied conditions otherwise than that. If you're going to be planting these in old pasture ground, you need to make sure that you kill the grass before you plant. We've found that brome grass is a tough competitor with hazelnuts during the establishment period. Typically, hazelnuts are going to be better suited for people who have larger lots of land or acreages because of the spacing requirements. They do grow to be a large shrub to small tree, so that 10 to 12 foot spacing between plants and 15 feet between the rows is important. They also do need pollinators because they're not self-pollinating, so you need pollinizer plants. But you could grow them in a home where you want a nice hedge a living hedge or screening kind of situation where you can get some nuts from your trees. An edible windbreak, for example, would be a type of thing. Rutgers and Oregon State have released or are going to be releasing some red colored varieties where they have red leaves, and actually the husks of the plants are red and stay red throughout the year. It's a really beautiful plant. So those will be coming along too.
You know, if you'd like to know more about that project, the Nebraska Forest Service is putting on a field day later in September. You can also find out more by visiting their website, nfs.unl.edu, and we were having a discussion off air about how yummy those hazelnuts are, and they belong in an edible landscape. Pretty much fun.
Absolutely.
All right, you have pictures from somebody sitting on the panel of an insect on milkweed, and we have the adults, and then we have the immatures, I believe. And the question is this a good guy or a bad guy, and what is it?
Well, it's the large. This one, the adult here, is a large milkweed bug. And then they're not cycling the picture for me.
Right, do we have the second picture up there, guys, or is this the only one we...
There it
we
is.
go, there we go.
Yep, those are the nymphs. Those are the nymphs. They do feed on the pods primarily this time of year. They can cut down on seed production. If you're concerned about seed production on the milkweeds, then yes, you might want to do something about them. A little bit of neem oil pick off, wash off with the hose. Those are all options. The larger ones would be able to crawl back on from a hose wash off in that case. But
there's a lot of insects.
The research does indicate we don't have problems up here with monarch production. It's in between the migration back and getting back here that's the issue.
Okay, there we go. So enjoy and ignore.
Yes.
All right. Speaking of ornamentals in the plant of the week, we have a question about never seen this before, and we had two different viewers send us pictures, and they're from two different parts of the state. Cole, what is this?
You know, I've seen this before. So yeah, snow on the mountain, right, Jeff? Euphorbia in the spurge family. Summer annual plant, so going to be propagated by seed, germinate in the spring, and produces a lot of seed. It'll reseed itself in beds where it's grown desirably, or in pastures or lawns where it's not desirable. So you can control it with a pre-emergent herbicide, probably something like Gallery would work best that we use for broadleaves in early spring. And then if you want to use a post-emergence herbicide, you could use pretty much any, if it's safe to apply these broadleaf herbicides, you could use pretty much any of those premixed products, and it should control it when it's in the vegetative state.
All right, and if you've only got one, watch it before it puts on its seed, right?
Sure, so you can enjoy it.
Yeah, and then off with its seed heads. Okay, excuse me, Lauren, you have a 40-year-old pin oak picture. We don't know where this person is from, but this is what we're seeing on the foliage.
So you can see kind of the leaves curling and the different spots on it. I believe this is anthracnose on oak. It is something that if it's a large tree, it's probably not going to be a problem. If it's a tree, well, you said it was 40 years old. It's fine. I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
On young trees, it can be a problem, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry about it on a mature tree.
All right, and not going to get it every year, maybe.
No, if it's not real wet next spring, you won't see it.
Okay. All right, Jeff, you have a series of pictures from viewers who either got microbursted or wind blasted or something.
Sure.
Storm tore down part of the tree. Is there anything they should do with this one now?
Cut it up and stack it behind the house.
Exactly. And this one, they lost half of their maple. They think damage was done in a previous storm, the way the trunk looked on the interior. They wonder, can they save the other half?
No. And you know, these are both included bark.
Yes.
And you can see that. So that's one of those pruning things we have to watch as trees develop co-dominant leaders, is to remove one early on in the tree's life.
Right, and I think we have maybe another one of another tree, and this one is a Tecumseh viewer again, a different one, missing a limb, and you can see this kind of interior stuff going on.
Yeah, and that's a small enough tree that maybe going in and doing some pruning, you could save that tree, get some of that out of there so we don't develop that. That will heal over time, but you can see that bark, that branch bark ridge there that we just saw in the last picture, and that's kind of an indication that we're going to start having some issues going forward. So anytime we have these narrow branches, these narrow leaders, that creates this included bark, and then as the tree gets heavier and we have some heavy winds, then we end up having damage like that. So again, it's kind of watching these trees the first 10 years to make sure we take some of those out.
Right, right. And if it's a really bad tree, you bring in an arborist and
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, we have announcements of things going on in the gardening world. Produce from the Heart, of course, has been all summer, every Tuesday through September. The Grow a Row, we are now at 1,400 pounds. The Backyard Farmer Garden alone has produced almost 500 pounds. So that is fabulous to be able to get that produce. We are going to be on location at State Fair in the Nebraska building next Wednesday. Q&A 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. and then we tape live at 4, so that'll be a lot of fun. Bring us your samples and don't stump the chumps. We'll see whether we know what you bring us. All right, so question. Let's see, this is an Omaha viewer who says they have an ash, they're not seeing emerald ash borer, but should they treat it, and does the time of year make a difference?
Time of year makes all the difference,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things last year when we first heard about emerald ash borer in Nebraska. There were some reports of people going around selling treatments in July and August, and that's not the time to treat those trees. You need to be treating them in the spring when they're actively pulling up from the roots and can translocate those insecticides up into the tips of the branches. So wait until next year and only treat if you're within 15 miles of a known site.
All right, excellent. We'll tell you that. We will tell you. All right, so this is Cole, sandburrs in a sand park box area in a neighborhood. How in the world do you get rid of sandburrs?
Okay, so that's tough to do. Sandburrs are summer annuals though, so you could try a pre-emergence herbicide in the spring or early summer. They're a little bit later germinating than crabgrass. Post-emergence herbicides, there's an herbicide called Echelon that is sulfentrazone, and I forget the other active ingredient now off the top of my head, but sulfentrazone is the one that's going to work on sandburrs, so that could be a good post product.
All right, before they get in your dog paws.
Right, yeah. Yeah, you got to get rid of the carcasses, not of the dog, of the weed.
Glad you clarified that.
Wrap it up.
Okay.
Do I need to be moving further away?
Yeah, he's dangerous tonight. Okay, Hastings viewer Lauren has an Indian magic crabapple that does have apple scab. So what do they use as a preventative?
Okay, so next year, right when you get into just when those buds are just starting to open up, that's when those infections start. So if it's a non-fruiting tree, any of the products with propiconazole would do a really good job if you're not keeping fruit.
All right, excellent. This is a Nahaka viewer, Jeff. They have acorn squash, full sun, near windbreak. The squash are bright orange instead of green. Are they edible? Are they a different?
Well, I would say if the squash is firm, like you normally would expect, and the vines look fine, it may be either you got a variety that may be orange. So that would kind of be my thought, is you planted one maybe inadvertently that was that sort of thing. So I don't know if I'd worry about it.
I wouldn't either. I mean, cut them open and throw a little brown sugar on them.
Well, and that's right. I mean, that's a great idea. Cut one open and make sure. But if it looks like your typical squash, you should be fine.
Okay, we have a little under a minute. So Wayne, grasshopper control. Granules this time of year, how do you eradicate them beyond the boundaries of the yard if that's the real concern here?
All right, if you're going to use granules, make sure it's the baited kind so that those grasshoppers are going to be ingesting them as they're growing and feeding yet. Not all grasshoppers are fully grown at this point in time, so you can catch them that. If you're looking for a more organic route that would last, and if you have the patience, is going after the Nosema locusti, which is a biological control agent. It's a microsporidian, and it takes years to get into that grasshopper population and really take it down. So if you have the patience of years, go for the Nosema to go after it. If you don't, go for the bait.
So my experience with people with grasshopper questions is they want to kill them now.